The moment the camera became portable, a new world opened for the photographer. Distinct from the studio environment, able to capture the world outside, in essence, street photography was born. Photographers began to document society, capture ironies, poke fun, and depict contrasts through the subjective nature of photography. The collective attention deficit disorder, demonstrated by 10-word tweets, irrelevant Facebook status updates, and 5-second news bites from corporate news stations, has never been more at play. Reality is presented to us from the hand of a producer who keeps a sponsor's interests at the forefront. This is the antithesis of street photography. Life is not scripted. Life does not exist only on a flat panel LCD, nor in a weekly tabloid. Life is right outside your front door, the domain of the street photographer. Like a walking sleep, most, when they leave their home, whether in a sprawling metropolis, the city center, or a seemingly bucolic suburb, are blind to life's moments happening around them. Each person you pass on your way to the grocery store, in a restaurant, or on the morning train is experiencing moments colored by their judgments, desires, and expectations. The street photographer, intuitively aware of our universal experience, seeks to capture the quiet and not so quiet subtexts. Whatever their motivation, photographers strive to capture the human condition as they see it. Chris Weeks, an editorial photographer from Los Angeles, shoots street as an adjunct to his professional life.
When I work, I have to pay attention to shot lists. What is the best chance of getting published, getting through traffic and dealing with egos, demands, and a continual erosion of copyright? It feels so insular and confining. That world is not reality, no matter how many of the players act like they're curing cancer. Going for a simple walk with no agenda except to walk and look and see is what I do to relax. I look at it as my reward. If we all saw the world as Audrey Tauto's character Anomaly, I think we'd be better off. I know we'd make better photos. When I'm just walking in the street or sitting in a cafe, I'm watching and observing, forgetting what's going on with me. Sometimes I see photographs everywhere and come home with a few rolls or gigabytes. Other times I've got some nice exercise and peace. Street photography is like life. You never know what it's going to throw at you or what you're going to get.
A photographer who shoots the human condition from passion, separate from those who hope to ride the wave of a fad on Flickr, sees photographs everywhere and is compelled to make photographs from a place deep within themselves, as one who concerns himself with the fruit and not the flower. Severin Koller, an editorial photographer from Vienna, Austria, makes these kinds of photographs for many reasons.
I think I started to forget things, and the moment I realized when I take a picture of something, it helps me not to forget about it. I started to shoot a lot. I started to shoot people, and because of scenes, I just need to save somewhere. And if you have a photo, you can also share it as well. So that's a good thing about it. You can just share what's happening in your world, what's happening around you. So I think everybody who takes street pictures has their own view of it. So any scene will be captured differently.
Street photographers run the gamut. Chris Weeks and Severin Koller shoot editorial. Others shoot Cape Cod landscapes, advertising, or travel. But fine art photographers, like Frank Jackson of Los Angeles, also love making these types of photographs.
What makes a good street photographer is someone that will go out with a camera and with a project in mind sometimes. Sometimes you're looking for specific things. But what really makes a good street photographer is someone that doesn't let the really cool things get away. You know, your eyes are open and you catch those moments. Someone asked me how I work, and I said basically sometimes I happen to photography and sometimes photography happens to me. And that means sometimes they find you or sometimes you find them. It's the same thing. Other than that, the whole point is you can go out without anything specific in mind, and you should always make an effort to do that. It keeps you sharp, and you learn every time you go out.
Photographers who shoot street have their own styles for making these types of photos. They have their own motivations. Tantamount to their success in shooting street, besides instantly deciding upon many compositions and sometimes tricky exposures, is being as anonymous as possible. Even Henri Cartier-Bresson thought that being the invisible man was perhaps the greatest aspiration of a street photographer. In an interview, he said, "I might be a cab driver, an anonymous someone to whom people reveal their inner selves. Though remaining faceless to his passengers, the driver can see their faces in the mirror. The photographer should be like that, unobtrusive, detached, yet close to people." The street photographer should think more like an agent of espionage, observing and documenting, but doing so unseen. While many argue on internet forums about which photographic machine is the best for street photography, anyone who uses a rangefinder knows what Monsieur Cartier-Bresson was talking about in their heart. A lumbering SLR can rarely escape the eye of a subject. Some will also say that shooting a rangefinder is old school and only used to pay homage to those who created the genre in the 1930s.
Back in '06, I wrote a document about purism in street photography. It was downloaded a lot of times, and of the comments I got, and there were a lot of comments, but of the negative ones, people ask why I only shoot a rangefinder, and I ask each one of them if they've ever used a rangefinder, and not one of them said yes. I mean, I get emails every week about why I was so adamant about using a rangefinder doing street. And what's interesting is a lot of people thanked me for being so adamant because they ended up buying a rangefinder and using it and discovering exactly how amazing it is. And I don't think they'll ever go back. It's also interesting to me that other negative comments I got were related to why I dismissed digital altogether. Well, at the time, the only full frame option was film. And I just prefer to shoot film. And it's funny because I ask each one of those people if they use film or have ever used film. And just like with the rangefinders, none of them have used film. So back in '06, digital really wasn't an option for me because I wanted to shoot full frame, and the only full frame was film. And now I have the ability to shoot full frame because Leica came out with an M9 full frame digital rangefinder, and I don't know, it's a strong competitor for me to film. And now, having used one for a while, I don't think that film is the only medium for street shooting. I can shoot one-to-one, and that's what I've always wanted. And what's so cool to me now is that I can use a rangefinder body to replace my heavier Canon body, and it melds into my workflow even for work. I mean, I'm not going to ever take conversely, I'm never going to take a 1DS Mark III out and shoot street with it, but now I can have a rangefinder and it can complement my other gear, and you know, that's amazing to me. When I'm shooting street, there's no other camera that allows me to be as anonymous and inconspicuous as a rangefinder, and what's really cool is that when I do, say, a gallery opening, and there's lots of beautiful light and lots of the world's most recognizable faces, it's a beautiful thing now that I can just take those anonymous photos and those discrete photos with a very silent camera and pull out the card, put it in the computer, and it goes alongside with my workflow from the Canon. It amazes me. I'm very happy about it. The clients enjoy seeing the non-magazine, non-pose stuff, and I have to admit that I really enjoy shooting that the most, and I can shoot, like I said, about a gallery opening or something else that's fancy and with lots of lights. I can shoot it just like I would shoot street. Seriously, anybody that wants to get better shooting street, not only with like the power of observation, but I think that if you just shoot a rangefinder, you'll see things completely differently because it's like a little window to the world, and I almost guarantee your street photography will get better.
The first time I had a rangefinder in my hands, I was 18 and just started to shoot analog. A befriended photographer who was in the business for his whole life borrowed me his Leica M6 with a 35 Zoom H4n for a couple of weeks. I couldn't give it back anymore, it was the perfect tool, so I just bought it. I choose the rangefinder because it has no mirror, which is more silent and lets me shoot slower shutter speeds without blurring the shot. The focusing system is quick and accurate, and I cover my face much less than with an SLR, which is important for the interaction with the subject I shoot. There is no zoom, all you can shoot with it happens right in front of your eyes. When I leave the house, I usually take my Leica with me. For me it's the perfect camera for capturing moments and people the way I see them. It's made to be discreet, but is still capable of producing the highest quality photos for 35mm film.
Whether it's mystique or homage, rangefinders have held up to the test of time. Besides electronic integration and full-frame ability, rangefinders have remained largely unchanged for 40 years. Yet according to Stephen Gandy, the owner of CameraQuest.com and rangefinderforum.com, demand for the cameras is strong with existing users and new users alike.
I think people are excited about rangefinders because fundamentally it's a different way of seeing things. So many photographers are used to the SLR way of shooting. You look through a box, you look on a screen, the screen changes, and it focuses, but it also changes the way that you're looking at your subject. Fundamentally, there's a different encounter. With rangefinders, what's happening is that you're looking basically straight on in a window to the world. It's like you're seeing it through a window pane, more or less, and it's always in focus. It sees like your eyes see. Rangefinder photography is fundamentally simpler to operate, so the photographer is more engaged to the subject and is more involved in the subject, both visually and also mentally, because they're not constantly doing the ins and out of what is the camera doing, because you know what the camera's doing. It's so much easier to control. Another technical aspect is that everything else being equal, it's simply easier to design the best optically rangefinder lenses than it is for an SLR. It has to do with the laws of optics. I don't understand it. God. People like, artistic people like to do things differently. They don't like to follow the crowd. If everybody else is shooting a Nikon or a Canon, of course they have to shoot something else. Or if everybody else is shooting an SLR, well then how can I do something better than they're doing? Just to be different. Rangefinder people that are really serious about it tend to be more nonconformist, in my opinion, than SLR people. It's not Leica by itself doing it. Of course they make fine products. They're doing it because of love of rangefinder photography by the people who love the style of photography and the images that it produces.
Rangefinders will not make aesthetically better photographs. However, they will, if used properly, make a better photographer.
I wish I would have had the resources to start out with a rangefinder. The way a rangefinder trains your eye to see with elements coming in and out of the viewfinder and the frame lines, it's unmatched by anything. An SLR changes unless it's a prime when you zoom in or out, but a rangefinder, it's just this little beautiful window to the world. The rangefinder's a window to life, and honestly, I wish I would have discovered one much earlier in shooting. It's been over 10 years since I've been shooting rangefinders, and there's nothing like it. I've shot almost everything with every piece of equipment I own, and honestly, there's nothing like shooting with one of these things. I have a Canon up to my eye 90% of the time because I'm working 90% of the time. And as much as the full frame Canons have big, beautiful viewfinders as opposed to what I started out with digital photography with this Nikon that has less resolution than my iPhone. And even though the Canons are nice and big and beautiful, nothing is like the viewfinder on a Leica. Or a rangefinder, but I shoot Leica, so there's just nothing like it.
Frank Jackson explains why he chases moments with rangefinders.
Rangefinders are really good for street photography and a lot of other uses because you're looking through this window. There's nothing between your eye but several pieces of really clean glass in a frame. And when you shoot the picture, with this camera, it doesn't go blank for a split second. No mirror flopping out of the way. You see exactly what happened the minute you push the shutter. But these are quiet, they're real simple. Quiet's real important. Quiet is important because you don't want people to notice you. And also, any noise while you're working can also affect you a little bit too. So the least amount of distractions is a good thing. These cameras, they're so well made, and they just feel like part of my hand and my eye. And there's not much to it. I mean, you got a meter, some buttons, a dial, and you put film in it, and you use it.
Moments are at the heart that keep street photographers always observant. They never know what will drift through their viewfinders. Making photographs of the human condition is rooted in chaos and imperfection. No matter the personality of the photographer, shy, aggressive, able to diffuse with his smile, he's always looking for that photograph. Whether or not the perfect photo exists is what keeps photographers on the hunt. The art of observation is key, and every street block or corner holds surprises, no matter if you're in Vienna, Los Angeles, Buenos Aires, or the one road downtown of anywhere in the world. Duano once said, "My need to be filled with wonder could find stimulation in the photographing of everyday life in Paris." It doesn't matter where the photographer lives or chooses to photograph as long as the sense of wonder exists. Street photography documents the human condition with this sense of wonderment to keep the present and future in touch with the past. When asked why street photography is important, art director and publisher of the book LA, Patrick Kahn, said, "Street photography is the only truthful still documentation of life, unrehearsed, unembellished, and unaltered. It is a true testimony of a moment in time, capturing a raw emotion, a poignant moment, or just subtle imagery of everyday life. The still photo, as opposed to the moving picture, allows the moment or emotion to be frozen in time, thus allowing the viewer to appreciate the synergy between the environment and the subject, the impact of a movement in relation to its surrounding. That image is where you discover the gem of what would have been forgotten in time if not captured, and will never happen again." Many walk a street and see a blur. or close their eyes and hear a cacophony of humanity. Street photographers notice the unseen. Dorothea Lange said, "Photography proves to us how little our eyes actually permit us to see." Much of everyday European history in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s was brought to our eyes by the likes of Doisneau, Boubat, Kertész, and Cartier-Bresson in France, Bill Brandt in the United Kingdom, Helen Levitt, Robert Frank, and Gary Winogrand in the United States. All street photographers. Hossein Farmani, founder of the Lucy Foundation and owner of the Farmani Gallery in New York, recently said, "Street photography, to me, is putting the camera up to your eye's line of fire, and in a fraction of a second, capturing an image that is simultaneously simple and complex. A moment, a snap, a second. A document and a study. It's a powerful medium that empowers the photographer to be an agent of change. Street photography is movement. It's life in motion. It's an offering to view from a different perspective. A single image possesses the ability to alter the course of history, to transform, and to even end war, conflict, or social plight. Throughout the course of mankind, a single image embodies qualities that can save lives or alter public opinion. A photograph such as Nick Utt's Napalm Girl possesses such power. Nick and this powerful image helped end the war and save many lives. Mario Anzuoni, an Italian photojournalist, explains how photojournalism and street photography share tenets of truth.
Street photography is a very genuine moment, and so it is what I do, and I capture moment and or moments, and they're spontaneous, natural. The more spontaneous, the better they are, and I guess the street context is as spontaneous as it gets, where you're capturing frames of people leading their lives, doing their business, whatever it is they do. You know, as a photojournalist, you have to be very, very careful not to interfere, not to alter. Okay, and in my field, photojournalism, that's what is expected from it. You have to portray what's going on without altering, without interfering, without creating, and that's really the most important thing. And I think that applies to a certain level to a street photography as well. Obviously, a street photographer is not necessarily bound by a code of ethics that tells him not to alter the reality that he's ready to take pictures of. But I think, like, in the end, you have to be genuine to yourself rather than a certain code.
Like Nick Utt, sometimes when you're on the street could catch fire or be blown up, such as on 9/11. Anything can happen. The street is not only the canvas for the street photographer, but for the photojournalist as well. Whether a street photographer is a photojournalist by occupation or works in another genre such as editorial portraiture, travel, or fine art, the street work they shoot is largely for themselves. Street photography is personal.
I love knowing that any time I have to go out, I have the chance of making a photograph. There are photographs everywhere. It's interesting. I used to get not upset, but something if I missed a moment. Whether it was the fact the exposure was too far off, to change it in time before wasting a frame, or the shutter wasn't cocked. It just didn't happen, for whatever reason. And since 99% of the time it was a rangefinder up to my eye, I saw it happen, and I made the photograph with my brain. I still had something to think about, yet whenever I do that, I always think of what Cartier-Bresson said. We deal in things which are continually vanishing, and when they vanish, there's no contrivance on the earth which can bring them back again. We can't develop and print a memory. Unless we're painters, of course, and I like to think of myself as a painter with ADD, which is why I'm a photographer. photographs I'd never think of making with film, and then recollecting later about them, I wish I would have made an exposure. Given the fact the Leica M9 full-frame digital rangefinder is now a choice, I'm going to make more of the photos I didn't make in the past. Coming from the film world, I prefer getting whatever moment I'm looking to shoot correct the first time, in camera. I used to think that only film could document a truthful and verifiable way to depict the human condition. Now having a Leica M9, and looking back, I feel that that way of thinking limited me. As long as I know my photographs aren't manipulated, I'm good with that. Street photography is a picture of reality. It's not a photographer's vision of reality. Besides burning and dodging, I don't believe excessive photoshopping is either appropriate nor acceptable. HDR has no place in street. There are so many beautiful moments that are beautiful all on their own and don't need augmentation. Those who rely on Photoshop as a style lack other skills, making them truly good photographers. I want someone to see my work and know it was just how I framed reality, at that moment.
Framing reality just as he saw it is what drives Mario Anzoni as well.
First of all, being able to show what's real, it's already a skill where you blend in with what's going on so you don't stand out like someone that is trying to portray whatever is happening in front of your eyes. So I think like the reality of it is essential, but how do you accomplish that is almost as important, because often you can tell that people change the way they're behaving if they feel intimidated or for some reason they're not entirely comfortable in front of a camera, and this applies to street photography as much as an event where photographers are present and they're expected to be there, and some people can just not act as spontaneous when there's a camera. And so blending in, being a fly on the wall, it's essential to preserve that reality of that moment. A good street photograph has a few elements. It has an element of spontaneity, but not just that. It's also that it manages to tell something with one frame, where you are able to cut into someone's existence with one single photograph. I think that a street photographer has to have some journalism sense in him or her, simply because you're trying to tell a story, and it's not prefabricated in front of you, it's real life, so you're trying to capture one single moment of the life rolling in front of your eyes. So you have to have that instinct where you see a story in something that is going on around you, and you find that picture. The street photographer also has a particular skill, which he doesn't mind being close to subjects And I think that's a very important skill for a street photographer.
Documenting the human condition is firmly rooted in truth. It is the photographer's obligation to not only shoot what's there, but as American novelist, screenwriter, and journalist James Agee said, "In every other art which draws directly on the actual world, the actual is transformed by the artist's creative intelligence into a new and different kind of reality, aesthetic reality. In the kind of photography we're talking about here, the actual is not at all transformed. The task of the artist is not to alter the world as the eye sees it into a world of aesthetic reality, but to perceive the aesthetic reality within the actual world, and to make an undisturbed and faithful record of the instant." The kind of beauty he records may be so monumentally static, as in much of the work of Matthew Brady, Hussein Atget, and Walker Evans, that the undeveloped eye is too casual or wandering to recognize it. Or it may be so filled with movement, so fluid and so transient, as in much of the work of Cartier-Bresson and of Helen Levitt, that the undeveloped eye is too slow and too generalized to foresee and to isolate the most illuminating moment. Many aspects must be considered when making street photographs: exposure, meaning behind the composition, anonymity, pressing the button at the right time. It may seem daunting to a photographer who is just discovering the genre. James Agee also spoke about luck and how it is a cardinal creative force at work in the universe, one which a photographer has the unique equipment for collaborating with because of the need to rely on intuition and feeling rather than intellect. It has nothing to do with photographic ability. Street photography is rooted in the chaos of life happening in front of all of us. While there is no way of ensuring luck, a photographer can learn to be a better observer and practice.
Or going out to make a beautiful street photograph for me usually is I'll see something and it starts to unfold in front of me. I'll get the camera out, get it ready, and I'll shoot a couple of frames. And in the back of my mind, I kind of remember it. I think you should explore street photography with a film camera and a digital camera. The film will make your digital photography better because light is light. If you don't understand light, you're in a world of hurt, because all the trouble you can get into is because you'll think it'll be easy to process things in your computer and they'll never look quite right. So you should understand how light works on things, the times of day to shoot, and then don't worry about the time of day because things happen when they happen. You can't break the rules of photography, you can bend them. If you break them, you get nothing. If you bend them, you can get some wonderful things.
I hope that you look at other photographers' work that you like. No matter how much you know about your camera, whether it's a rangefinder or SLR or whatever, just go out and shoot. Don't burn film, but go out with a purpose and having work you enjoy in the back of your mind. Look for things. I never know what I'm going to see. Perhaps because I'm used to shooting in Los Angeles, I'm not as surprised about certain things as I am shooting in Europe. In Napoli, I've seen processions revolving around something religious. In France, I've seen protests of tens of thousands of people break out of nowhere. I've walked around a corner in Scandinavia and watched someone learning to walk a tightrope. Street photography is tied to some visual lottery. You never know what you're going to get. However, if you know how to observe photographically, you'll of course increase your chances of making a good photograph. Don't worry about doing what you have to do to make the photo. Don't listen to your internal dialogue. Listen to your gut. Don't be stupid, but get the photo. I hear the complaint that I live in a small town, nothing happens here. And I smile because I wish I had more time to shoot in places where there aren't so many people. There are moments there too. Photos are everywhere. You just have to know how to look.
When you just started to do street photography, then simply dare to shoot. Street is a lot about experience and routine. There isn't much time to focus and compose, so you have to be one with the camera. The right tool, therefore, is important. When you shoot a lot, you'll get the feeling for a moment before it even happened, and that's the key for good street shots. For the perfect shot, you need to be very skilled and quick at the same time. For an interesting way of seeing things, you need to have an eye for the subtle and then the talent to capture it in this way. Of course, the best is when people can combine both things. A good street shot is either the perfect documentation of an interesting moment or the way something got documented that makes a rather ordinary situation look special.
Street photography is the most level playing field of all photographic genres, yet also the most difficult. No matter the photographer's experience, the photographic challenges exist just the same. What distinguishes an experienced street photographer from someone who hasn't practiced as much is the talent of observation. No matter what you do, the best way to get better is to practice. Look at things photographically, even when not photographing.
Street photography is my golf. I get just about as much exercise, and it's something that requires me to be very patient. I make better photographs when I'm relaxed. Whether I'm shooting film and have to wait for a while, or digital and I get to see them as fast as my Mac ingests them to aperture, it always seems like a present. Lots of little surprises. Like life, some of the surprises are beautiful, some tense, some happy. To me, they're all amazing in one way or another. Photographically, there's nothing like it. And yes, I'll always chase the perfect frame. Even though I know it doesn't exist, doesn't stop me from trying, nor should it stop you. There is nothing I like shooting more than street photographs.
Patrick Kahn said that what makes a good street photograph is the storytelling element, the candid emotion caught, and went on to explain it captures the essence of a situation and enables the viewer to enter into the subject's life and imagine what led to that moment and what the impact of that moment has in relation to the subject and its environment. Good street photography is intuitive. Photographers capture moments as they feel them. They are perceptive and true observers. They can anticipate and discover the unseen to the unexperienced eye. They understand the role in every detail of a scene that plays in relation to the focal point of interest. Framing and angles are key to the narrative and emotion. After more than 50 years, a woman named Sharon Goldstein recognized herself in one of photographer Robert Frank's photographs entitled Elevator Girl. In an interview, she recently said, "He saw in me something that most people didn't see. I have a big smile and a big laugh, and I'm usually pretty funny. So people see one thing in me. And I suspect Robert Frank saw something that was deeper, that only people who were really close to me can see. It's not necessarily loneliness. It's dreaminess." Besides luck, observation, compassion, and readiness of one's equipment, Cartier-Bresson said, "In photography, the smallest thing can be a great subject. The little human detail can become a leitmotif." Such is street photography, documenting the human condition.